Hello from Barcelona. This is Rob Marvin, Associate Features Editor of PC Mag, here with Sean Ginnivan and Dave Kleidermacher, both with Android. Sean is the Head of Global Strategy and Market Enablement for Android Enterprise, and Dave oversees, he's the VP of Security for Android, Chrome OS, and Google Play. Quite a lot. But let's start with Android Enterprise. Sean, you came in just a couple months ago. So in these first few months overseeing Android Enterprise, what have been kind of your main priorities? What have you sort of been, your big picture goals for Android on the business side?
Sure. So I think if you look at Android Enterprise broadly, our goal is to make the decision process easier for customers. And one of the announcements coming out of Mobile World Congress is a program we launched called Enterprise Recommended, really designed to simplify the decision process of what devices are appropriate for me to use in business. So am I going to get the security updates I expect? Am I going to get the device longevity and OS upgrades that I expect over the life cycle of that device? And we've been super thrilled to work with leading OEMs presenting here at the show to bring that program to life. I think the other one we've been working on is really consistency. One of the things I joke around with folks is that when I joined Google, I wanted to learn more about Android Enterprise and where it fits and how to use it. And we have great documentation on how to build an EMM. We have great developer docs. We've not necessarily built a lot of the documentation for IT administrators and for a lot of our channel partners who are using and working with the platform on a daily basis. And so we'll be launching a series of programs. We just launched Android Academy this week, which will help our channel partners and our reseller partners better understand how we think about Android and how we position it to the market. That will be followed by a lot of technical training. What are best practices for deployment? What are best practices for security? What are best practices for app development? And all that you'll see rolling out over the next several months.
Right. And you mentioned the Android Recommended program, and that you launched that with an inaugural list of devices. Can you talk a bit more about the program and sort of what the enterprises get when they choose recommended devices?
Yeah, so Enterprise Recommended establishes a set of objective criteria set by Google around what behaviors an enterprise device should be exhibiting in the market. We've done at an engineering level a great job of taking Android Enterprise, which is really the management and security features baked into your phone, right? Baked into the phone in your hand, that would allow you to say, how do I push an app down to this device? Or how do I set a password policy on this device? How do I make sure encryption's enabled? And so we've really extended that across all the different Android handsets. Even the Android Go handsets that have been talked a lot about here at the show can be enrolled into a mobility management platform and put into an enterprise environment. But they may not necessarily have the behaviors that an enterprise expects to get when they're selecting a device for their business. Right. And so Enterprise Recommended establishes what those behaviors are. We work with the OEM ecosystem and say, hey, we're launching this program. We're going to showcase to enterprises some of these devices, and they self-nominate. So folks like Huawei and LG, BlackBerry, Nokia, and many more have been actually nominating devices to us, and we've been testing those behaviors. So we make sure that they haven't interfered with the enrollment process into Android Enterprise, that they aren't shipping default applications. They may mess with the experience of making the device enrolled into a business environment. And as we validate those and as we bring more OEMs through the year, you'll see more of those devices published up at android.com/enterprise.
Great. And Dave, you came to Android recently from you were the CSO at BlackBerry, and before that, deep experience kind of embedded IoT. Can you talk about the kind of mindset you brought into the role and some of your biggest security priorities since starting at Google?
Sure. Being at BlackBerry really sort of opened my eyes to some of the bigger challenges in enterprise, which is quite different from the consumer space in that they have typically very high value data. BlackBerry, as you know, is quite heavily involved in regulated enterprises, right. Governments, medical, so forth. And so got a feel for the value of the problem and how important it is to them, and learned that when you can solve the most difficult and challenging security problems, that will translate over to the rest of the market, because obviously consumers like to know that the banks are happy with the device security, that medical companies are happy with that. Another thing I learned from that experience was that oftentimes you might be surprised to learn that a CIO of a large enterprise actually is relatively unsophisticated sometimes in their understanding at the deeper levels of security. And so they just expect security to work out of the box. It has to be easy to use. And so another sort of premise is, yes, secure by default, have very good security across the stack, but make it really easy to use and seamless. And so that's another sort of focus area for Android security.
And Android Enterprise is deployed in a wide array of different industries. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about sort of the markets you guys are playing in, and I guess the challenges as you sort of expand the scope of where Android lives. How do you how you're tackling that?
Yeah, so I think when we collectively think about Android, we often get led down to the smartphones and tablets and things that live in our pocket.
Sure.
And we actually see Android as much broader than that, even for enterprises. So Android Enterprise is used in a variety of different applications like retail and point of sale. We see Android Enterprise being deployed and ruggedized environments for things like warehousing and manufacturing. We see Android Enterprise being used in the healthcare sector, and folks looking to that platform. Even a company like Pitney Bowes, who makes postage meters, has actually taken an Android tablet, baked into their postage meter, and delivered services on top of it to change the entire mail weighing experience. And I mean, it's really fun to see this common platform that we use every day for keeping entertained, for keeping up to date on news, being used in all these business segments. And I don't think there's necessarily any one vertical that's dominated this space, and it's because we bring this diversity of form factor, application, and price point that allows a variety of different enterprises, a variety of different geos to be successful with it.
Right. I'm glad you brought up form factor, because Android obviously lives on so many different kinds of devices, be it Android Wear, Android Auto, Android Things. Dave, and can you talk about the challenges of securing Android on those different form factors?
Well, actually, I think one of the core advantages of Android is that a lot of the big challenges in security are similar across those different form factors. Of course, there are challenges specific to each. Sure. In each market or device, but some of the common problems, biggest problems are things like malware protection. Yes, you can get malware in your TV, right? We've seen some of those things. And also security updates. And so if you think of a consumer electronics manufacturer trying to solve that problem on their own, that's a tall order. Whereas if you look at what we've done in the mobile market in terms of getting the monthly updates, regular updates, part of Enterprise Recommended is the regular updates, the key part of the recommended program. And things like having always on, built into the operating system malware detection, you kind of get those for free when you use the Android Things platform, Android Auto, and so forth. So we're helping all those different vertical markets solve those problems. Right.
And a lot of that also stems back to Google Play, which you're also overseeing. Can you talk a bit about, Play Protect, and also just the threat landscape that you've been dealing with, with PHJs, potentially harmful applications, and just the general strategy you've taken in, continuing to improve the Play Store?
Sure thing. Yeah. There's no question in my mind that malware threats are pretty much the most important threat that faces the average user, more so than some of the vulnerabilities you hear get talked about in the press. It's actually very, very rare to see any kind of scaled attack against vulnerabilities to exploit them. It's really that humans tend to be a little bit easier to trick, right? Phishing for your credentials is not a very sophisticated attack that we all can sometimes fall for. And so how do you defend against that at scale? Well, Google Play Protect is the brand that we launched last year. Actually, product technology-wise has been in there for a long time. We've been making many enhancements to it. But the idea is that when you have billions of devices and users, the only way to protect them at scale is to have that malware protection built into the operating system. That's really what Google Play Protect is. And as an example of some of the really important enhancements over the past couple of years, it's not just analyzing the code to see what the vulnerabilities are, or even running them in emulated environments to understand the behavior and what malicious behavior might be going on. It's applying the latest advances in machine learning, something that Google obviously is very good at, and taking that ML expertise and applying that to the malware problem. So this will help you find real-time threats that you've never seen before, apps that you've never seen before, but exhibit behavior that machine learning models can help identify. And so the great news is that if you look at the history of the average malware rate on Play over time, it's a steady sloping line down. It's great. And in 2017, we've had a 50% reduction in the average rate of malware installation from Play, to the point where now like the odds of installing a PHA or potentially harmful application on Play is around the odds of being struck by lightning in your lifetime. So I think the average user can feel very confident from that. That doesn't mean we're resting on our laurels. There is a tremendous investment at Google in the malware problem. We're privileged and a bit spoiled in Android security. We have the Google Brain team, DeepMind team. We have some of the foremost experts in the world in ML that are sitting next to us and helping us apply that technology to the malware problem.
Right, so let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, Google employs machine learning and artificial intelligence across its entire product stack, kind of rewriting how its software works with AI. Can you both talk about how AI is impacting what you're doing with Android, and I guess just how it's changing the way you work?
Sure. I mean, I think there's a famous quote from our CEO Sundar who said, we're moving from a mobile-first world to an AI-first world, and it's definitely something we're living at Google. AI is very much at the core of everything we do. So if you look at something like photos, one of the things I like to do is go up to Napa Valley and go wine tasting, and I'll take, the way I know where I've been and what's tasted good is I can literally go into Google Photos, search for wine bottle, and it pulls everything up. And it's just, a fundamental different experience than I think, we would have ever thought about 10 years ago. We use artificial intelligence and lots of other consumer services like Google Translate. And I think what's unique about Google is that we take a lot of those services and make them available for developers as they build their own application experiences, both for enterprises as well as for consumers. Right. So if you want to build an application that looks and acts and behaves like Assistant, you can use a platform like Dialogflow to go and build all those voice interactions. And it's using the same sorts of machine learning and text-to-speech and speech-to-text tool sets that Power Assistant you can build into your own application. And the examples go on and on. A lot of the services like DeepMind and Google Brain, we expose in Google Cloud, so folks can use machine learning models in their own applications. And we've seen a lot of success like that. In that, you take a company like Rolls-Royce, who is actually using Google machine learning models to build autonomous freightliners, autonomous container ships, just as one of many, many examples where the Google AI tool sets are being used.
Great. And Dave, AI on the security front?
Yeah, obviously, just the malware thing is a huge focus. But in order to, depending on what kind of ML technology you're using, one of the often really important aspects of it is you have to have a lot of data to drive the model. And that's where we have really some excellent advantages in that Google Play Protect is running on over 2 billion devices now. So the visibility into a massive set of data of what the apps are doing, behavior of the device, to analyze badness is really, really helpful. So that's why we're able to tune the models. That being said, Google doesn't have a corner on all ML technology. Another really key aspect of what we're doing is working with third-party security companies like Lookout, Checkpoint, other firms that are also investing heavily in the malware protection problem. So you can think of Google Play Protect as not just the best of what Google is doing for detecting badness and defending devices and users, but also working with those third-party companies as partners to help that problem.
Right, so I mean, across the security industry as a whole, is that those sort of, pooled AI resources, is it helping to, I guess, take a more predictive approach to security? Yeah,
for sure. And again, this is sort of like a central theme of Google and Android is we're better together and having an open ecosystem. And so the diversity of the platforms and the amount of data we get helps us drive these solutions better. And it's a shared responsibility. It's Google, it's the third-party security company, it's also the manufacturers, all the different OEMs we work with who are doing a great job, as you can see from the enterprise recommended list, are doing a fantastic job in helping us solve the problem of badness, which is always a constant problem.
Right, and as we're talking about this sort of mountain of data that Google has to draw from with AI, it begs the question of data privacy, which is something that Google's been a bit more vocal about lately. Can you talk about, I guess, Google's philosophy when you're talking about dealing with people's personal data or business data?
Sure. So I mean, we think that data privacy is core to what we do, and it's our obligation to keep data secure and maintain data privacy for our customers, whether they be consumer customers or whether they be people in the enterprise market. Right. We're here in Europe, in Barcelona, the GDPR and the European data privacy regulations are top of mind for lots of folks including us, and we've made a lot of those commitments public, both on the Google Cloud website, as well as on the Android websites, and you can Google that and find a lot of that information available. We also take extra steps for enterprise customers specifically. So if you're a G Suite customer, we're not going and looking into Google Docs or looking into Gmail, or if you're using our machine learning models, we're not using that data either to improve our own products or to monetize our services. That data remains yours. That's our obligation to you as an enterprise customer. And so data privacy has definitely been top of mind and across our businesses, and it's something we take very seriously.
And just to add a comment to that, that's not new. Like, that's been, if you think about like Google's view and the stewardship of data, customers trust us to protect the data. And so if you sell the data, you lose trust. So Google doesn't actually sell it. It's like another misconception that Google sells the data. Right. Google operates on the data and provides intelligence. And so a good example is malware protection, where you might analyze what's going on, but that data is never pulled off. That's never, like, the actual data, user data is never exposed.
Right. Google's not taking Rolls-Royce's autonomous freight data and using that for Waymo.
Exactly.
And if you look at like just the original data at rest protection, like the actual data encryption on device, that's kind of like probably the #1 security feature that mobile devices need. That for years now, that encryption on Android it's fully based on the user's credential, right, and something on inside the hardware on the device, and that way there's nothing Google can do to access that device. And there's nothing anybody else can do to access the data on the device. Only the user can access it.
Right. Another thing, I guess, jumping off that I wanted to talk about is that looking at Apple, they've had to deal a lot lately with users' data requests. Sort of dealing with law enforcement agencies when it comes to personal data on those devices. What's Google's perspective on that, and have you guys had to deal with that as well?
Yeah, I think that every organization that handles data has to be compliant with the law, and we work pretty aggressively to certainly honor requests when they're made, but also make sure that those requests are lawful. And I think we've been pretty public that we really want to make sure that requests are valid and the scope is narrow to the actual request, as opposed to saying, let's go and turn troves of data over to authorities, whether it's in or outside of that request. And it's something that we've been very, very thoughtful for in the policy team to make sure that again, we are maintaining the privacy and integrity of user data wherever we can.
And just to add another comment to that, which is, I think this is another area where the open source nature of Android is a huge advantage, right, because it's an open platform, the code is out there for everyone to see. And so the idea that you'd place a backdoor in the source code of the operating system is something that's just not practical in an open source platform, whereas in closed source platforms that could be possible. And so I think transparency is a theme that's really important to us, and data privacy. Again, back to the data encryption thing, that design is inherently focused on the data only can be accessed by the user and not by anyone, not by Google, not by governments or anyone else. And
that topic of encryption kind of leads into, I guess, the broader note that I wanted to end on, which is, we're at Mobile World Congress right now. You see all the latest mobile innovations being debuted all around us. What are, I guess, some of the next mobile breakthroughs, be it security, be it anything else related to the Android ecosystem that you guys are really watching right now? I guess the mobile breakthroughs you think are going to be really exciting.
Yeah, I think here at the show in particular, we've really been championing a few things. One has been consistency of experience. So we've talked about that in the enterprise world. Android One has been a big theme here at the show, where we're again showcasing the best of Google services and that user experience with minimal kind of OEM intervention on top of that. And partners like Nokia have stepped up and said they're going to use Android One throughout the devices they bring to market, and that's been really positive. I think it's also really getting these services out to more users. We talked about expanding that to people beyond knowledge workers, and how do we take this into the line of business to those folks in field services, folks in the warehouse, folks on the manufacturing line, and make them just as connected as Dave or I are here at the show as knowledge workers. But it's also, how do we go and connect the unconnected, and how do we take these experiences out to people who may not have been able to afford them? If you look at the market, even now, Android devices have been really expensive, or smartphones in general have been very expensive. And I think, we've gone through with announcements in Android Go here at the show to really take these experiences out to people who may not have been able to afford them in the past. And through our broader initiatives at Google about connecting the unconnected, I think that's going to be a meta trend. We've obviously in Western Europe and the United States enjoyed a lot of these experiences. How do we push them into additional markets?
Yeah, and I guess just to, echo another comment we had before on the Internet of Things and all these connected devices. For me, what's really exciting to come to Mobile World Congress and what used to be very centric, very smartphone centric and 4G, 3G, network technology centric, really is a lot more about mobility at a much more coarse level. Pretty much any smart device essentially can be mobile, and the challenges and opportunities of a connected world is really fantastic. And for Google and for Android, the ability again for the security to be able to solve some of these really challenging security problems at the platform level, so it applies to cars and autonomous vehicles and wearables and all that, is super exciting.
And I guess, what are some of the emerging security threats that you guys have, I guess, beyond the brunt of the malware that you're dealing with? I guess what are some of the emerging threats that you've sort of started to monitor?
I do think that it's still malware that is the biggest threat. You hear a lot, again, talk about various vulnerabilities that come up, and we spend a lot of time and energy hardening the platform so that there are always going to be vulnerabilities. There'll be bugs in any complex piece of software, but that doesn't mean there have to be exploitable vulnerabilities. Right. And so anti-exploitation techniques are really front and center, and so I think that has essentially proven to be very effective. They're just very hard to find these scalable exploits of vulnerabilities. But at the malware level, that's still a big challenge. Now, exactly what the flavor of the day is for malware, it changes. And you hear today a lot about cryptocurrency issues. So there seems to be a little bit of an uptick on fraud relating to cryptocurrencies. But honestly, for us, it doesn't really matter. Each different family of malware might change over time, but we view it holistically as, we just have to detect what's going on and solve it.
All right. Thank you guys so much for taking the time. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.